So I've had a topic I wanted to talk about for about 2 years now. And it relates to a Reddit thread that pops up every other month. And in one form or another, it states something like YouTubers are greedy or game dev YouTubers, I kinda hate them. And if you listen to any of these topics raised, they usually raise a couple of issues that they might have. The issues raised are often that the game dev YouTubers lack merit, which is most often that they haven't released a successful game. Something along the lines of they are greedy, they're selling courses, they clickbait content, and most of their income is not from game dev, so it might be that they're selling courses instead. I actually fit a lot of these categories in some way or another. I haven't released a game. I do on occasion get accused of clickbaiting, and most of my income is not from game dev. But I want to talk about this a bit, because while I think the criticism is valid in some regards, I think the biggest issue with this criticism is that it stems from unrealistic expectations. Why do I say this? Well, it's because YouTube is a platform where creators make videos. So YouTubers are either hobbyists, they're teachers, or entertainers. The YouTube videos themselves either teach you a skill, they're there to entertain, or they're made as a hobby by someone who kind of has two hobbies, want to talk about it. They can incidentally be professionals, it's just that this is extremely rare. And where I think this issue becomes tricky is because if we look at analogous example, like any other profession where you have professionals versus teachers, there isn't an expectation that the teachers should be professional. We know that if you're making movies, you're probably not teaching movies because you're making movies. So I think that while the criticism itself is valid, yes, people like me who make YouTube videos is not as reliable of a source as someone who's actually making games. The thing is that you probably can't get a hold of the people actually making games. You can if you look at GDC or any type of developer conferences or interviews with them. The problem with those is that they're generally not as entertaining. And so the issue that I see with some of this criticism, especially in regards to the most successful channel, is that they're in some regards suffering from success. They're compared to an idealized version of what the viewer wants. They're compared to a developer who makes games successfully, doesn't want to make an income on the videos they make entertaining content that is extremely educational. These four things are kind of incompatible in some regards. They exist for very few channels. You won't get there. Nothing allows for it. I do, however, think that there's an aspect of it where there can be valid criticism. And that usually comes from whether they have bad advice. But if you have that criticism, they have some bad advice, it's probably better to target that advice. And the reason I think that is because people like me, I might be giving bad advice at times. If you levy this criticism, it will probably find its way to YouTubers so that they can make better videos and stop giving bad advice. There's a reason I tend to try and stick to art. I try and most of the time not market myself as a game dev channel. And I am first and foremost a YouTuber because I like talking about art. I happen to be doing game dev as a hobby, which gives me a lot of insight into the overlap between art and game dev and how game dev relates to art. But I still maintain that I'm fairly knowledgeable on this issue. Not because I've released a game, but because you see my art and you like it. But I still think there's an aspect where you have to realize that YouTube is the first step in most people's learning. They want to learn game dev, so they go on YouTube to learn. And the thing with learning is that you actually progress and you learn. So 3 years down the line, you might be watching the same YouTuber and hear them saying the same advice that they've given before. And naturally, you grow tired of them. They're not teaching you more stuff. And you might see this as an issue with the YouTuber, but it's really an issue with you learning. You have progressed past that YouTuber. You have progressed past that teacher. It's like you being a high schooler and going back to your first grade teacher and complaining that they're teaching the alphabet. After all, they did that 10 years ago. It's true, but a teacher is focused on teaching. They're not necessarily always focused on learning, especially since they're generally marketed to the masses. I expect most of you to outgrow my content. In an ideal world, that would happen. You'll grow bored of what I'm saying because you're learning past what I'm saying. You've listened to what I've said, taken it to heart, and now you don't want to hear me talk about readability once again. I kind of want that to happen. You learn, move past, and progress. And hopefully you even stop watching YouTube and start developing. But the first couple of years of any hobby, you generally start at YouTube. It's a free platform where you can get decent advice, not ideal, perfect advice, but decent advice. And people make some money giving you that advice, even though you don't have to pay for it. And a couple of years into that hobby, you've moved past that. And now you have no content because no one's really good enough to produce content for you. That's a win in my book. So on the first two types of criticism, lack of merit and income not from game dev, I think this is true, but if you feel this, you should be happy that you've moved past YouTube. You can be sad about there not being something more for you, but that's usually the case with any skill that you get really good at. I don't really watch that much art YouTube. I don't watch game art YouTube, and I don't watch game dev stuff in general, because most of the time it's stuff that I've heard before. But there was another criticism, and that was greed and clickbait. And I think this is tricky. I think the issue when I see the criticism of greed is that there are very different types of YouTubers, but they get lumped together. If you're not a YouTuber, you might have the conception or the idea that you can see someone's subscriber numbers, and from those subscriber numbers, estimate how much money they make. This should not be done. The revenue comes from how many views they get. And so if you look at two YouTubers, one with 200,000 subs and 20k views a month, and then another with 50,000 subs but 500,000 views a month, the second YouTuber will make more money. And I think that if you regularly watch a YouTuber that pulls in 200,000 views a video and releases a video every day, they might actually be making quite a bit of money. But if you compare that to most game dev YouTubers, they maybe get 30,000 views and release one video every other week or once a month. And from that, they're probably not actually making money, at least not from AdSense or YouTube in general. 1 day of work a month for me is equivalent to what I earn on YouTube every month. So if you actually end up trying to do YouTube full time, you have to make a secondary revenue source, be it sponsorships, Patreon, or courses, which in some regards suck. But if you're not doing that, then you're just making videos out of the kindness of your heart. But if you do it just because it's fun, the risk is that eventually you might outgrow it or do something else that actually gives you money and is fun. And I think game dev is a particularly tricky field with this. There aren't that many watching. So in terms of greed, I kind of agree in that there are business practices that are inherent to YouTube that might not feel that nice to do. It's not that fun to read sponsorships. It's not that fun to sell stuff that you'd rather give out for free. But the other aspect is it's not that fun putting a lot of effort into something that pays you nothing, especially if you get kind of decent at it. And so you're stuck in this kind of shitty situation. And just because Kai Cenat or iShowSpeed or MrBeast exist doesn't mean that every YouTuber that employs a similar tactic does so because they want to be insanely rich, because their niche isn't big enough to become insanely rich. Their niche might be just big enough to earn enough so that you don't have to work at Starbucks. I think the second argument of clickbait kind of falls into the same umbrella of greed. When I release a video, I try and make it clickable because I want the people viewing to watch it. And I think that there are two forces there. One is you want to make it enticing, but you don't want to trick the viewer. And that balance can be tricky. I think I've made two videos that kind of straddle that line. One is called The Problem with Pixel Art. While in the video itself, I try to be rather balanced and still maintain that I like pixel art. Because I do. But from the title itself, you might get the impression that I hate pixel art and not that I'm raising one issue I have with pixel art. And a similar thing has occurred with another video where I said why showing the sky is a mistake. Where I talk about an issue that arises when you try and make scenes showing the sky in any game ever. And I maintain that most of the time that investment is probably quite tricky. It can be done, but it is something that you're giving up for it. And I think it can be a mistake for most people. And with the title, I made the impression that it's always a mistake. In both of these cases, I might be adding an implication that I'm not necessarily having in the video. And it sucks when it happens. The thing is that hedging in your title will remove clicks. I have to make a title that is easy and quick and readable to understand. And that means that it has to be kind of short and it has to be understandable. So I always make the choice that I write kind of my opinion and then I hedge in the video, which might be clickbait. But the thing is that if I don't do that, I simply don't get views. I don't like that, but I also don't like not getting views. And in this situation, I find one to be the lesser of two evils. The thing is, I know that at times this will mean that you get annoyed that I clickbait you, but I don't do it out of malice. It will happen because I'm not perfect. All of this to say is that I see the criticism and I kind of agree with it to some extent. I do think that they aren't the ideal version of who you want teaching you. but your high school teacher was probably not the ideal version of who you wanted to teach you. So we kind of come to the question of, should you watch YouTubers? Even though it's in my interest that you watch my content, I think this answer isn't simple. For some of you, yes, you should probably watch YouTubers. For others, maybe, kind of. And for some, definitely not. If you're really starting out, I think watching someone that is entertaining and can speak to you on kind of your level when starting out, to maintain the interest you have in the hobby, that will eventually develop into something that could potentially be a career, then yeah, watching YouTube is probably good. For any hobby that I start, I tend to start with YouTube, and then either I fall out of love of the hobby, or I fall out of love of watching the YouTubers. And that's the natural progression of it. Either way, I stop watching the YouTubers probably. But they're a good starting point for making a difficult topic feel kind of accessible. And more so, it might be nice having someone talking and discussing a thing you're learning and find entertaining. And if you're in this bucket, then yeah, watch YouTubers. Once you've progressed at a certain point, I generally think that from a learning standpoint, it's generally better to draw as much as possible rather than just watching people draw. And it's probably better looking at documentation rather than watching a YouTuber who has read the documentation. It's better to learn the skill of learning rather than finding someone who has learned the skill of learning and copying them. And so if you're past this initial bucket, your method of research and your method of learning should probably change. You shouldn't just have someone telling you stuff anymore. But even when you are at this point, I find it quite often that I might be consuming people that are engaging in it, mainly for the purpose of inspiration. So if I see someone make something really cool, it inspires me to also try that really cool thing. And that makes me put in more hours than I otherwise would have. I spent a lot more game dev time than I usually do because I saw that dual grid system that Jess Codes implemented. And the biggest part of Jess Codes' video for me was inspiration. And I thought it was really cool. So if you're in that bucket, then yeah, watching YouTubers might make sense. But if you're watching YouTubers and YouTube videos that you don't like, that you aren't learning from, that you don't find inspirational, and that you don't find entertaining, then no, don't watch YouTubers. You shouldn't watch me if that's happening. That sounds like a bitter experience. As a super short point, should you make YouTube videos as a marketing tool for doing game dev? I generally don't think you should. People that I think should make YouTube videos are people who like making YouTube videos. And they do it because they want to make YouTube videos. It's a whole different set of skills. And it's a lot of different skills and a lot of effort. I like making YouTube videos. I would probably continue making YouTube videos even if I earned more money than I needed. And the reason I don't think you should make YouTube videos is because of all these skills that you have to learn and all this effort you have to put in. Effort that won't go into making a good game. And I think the best marketing tool is making a good game. And if it's not making a good game, then it's making a good looking game that people will buy because it looks good. None of this relates to learning lighting or scripting or marketing. And the thing is, if you end up in the bucket of making YouTube videos, it's true that you will become in part a YouTuber. You'll spend equal amount of time doing YouTube, if not more, than you do on game dev. I spend more time on YouTube than I do on game dev. But if you enjoy making videos and you enjoy talking about stuff, then go ahead. But I don't think it's a particularly good marketing tool. And if it was a good marketing tool, I don't think it would actually feel that particularly nice as a marketing tool. Because it's true that if I were to release a game on my channel, some people would probably buy it because they like watching my YouTube videos. And a portion of those people will be disappointed because the game might not be up to their expectation. And they bought it purely because they like my videos. And the ideal world to be in as a game developer is that you make a game that is fun and they buy it because they like the product. In the case for my YouTube videos, people at least watch the videos because they're enjoyable or they learn. That feels morally more okay. And I think you'd be just more comfortable if you made a good looking game, you marketed it traditionally, and you spent a lot of the time that you would have spent on making videos on actually making the game better. You release a better game than what you otherwise would have. So in conclusion, I don't think YouTubers are greedy, but I think that there are some aspects of generating revenue that might at times feel kind of morally gray. I hate advertisements. I pay for YouTube Premium in order to avoid them. But I see it as a trade-off. I think the issue would arise if you're selling bad courses to people who have no money. But assuming they have money, then it's probably fine selling some courses. I buy courses on occasion because sometimes I like watching them. Overselling courses and either making them really expensive and making the audience feel like they have to buy them in order to achieve something, well, that would feel more morally bad. But just selling them I don't think is inherently wrong. A similar thing occurs with Patreon. I have a Patreon. I'm not releasing enough content on there. I don't like that. I do know that people can unsubscribe if they feel like I'm not releasing enough content, but it still feels bad as a content creator to have a Patreon channel, ask people to subscribe there, and then not have enough time to make the content for that platform. I don't know what to do about that issue, but I don't like it morally. If people want to support me just for the goodness of their heart, that's good. But if they feel like they should be getting better content than what I produce on my YouTube, that's not the case. And I haven't really resolved that. But as a principle, the money I do get on Patreon will help me make more content because I produce content quicker now than I used to. And that's because I've invested more money into the channel than I've earned from the channel. But yeah, still, there are aspects of it that can be either outright bad, questionable, or not that bad. And it usually comes to overselling something that isn't good. On the second part of this conclusion, I do think that every single person that is watching me for the sake of learning should eventually stop watching me. You should outgrow what I have to teach. This was a long unscripted video. I hope it made sense. Thanks for watching. Bye.